"Excuse me," Kai mouthed even though no sound came out. He'd learned that people responded to the movement of his lips even when they couldn't hear him. All three men looked up, and for the first time, Kai found himself staring directly into Minjun's eyes. They were dark brown, almost black, and held a depth that surprised him. For a heartbeat, the world consisted of only those eyes and the unspoken question in them. Kai broke eye contact and gestured at the water glasses, then at the pitcher. Minjun nodded slightly and Kai moved forward. As he reached for Minjun's glass, he deliberately bumped the wine glass with his elbow. It tipped, spilling red wine across the white tablecloth. Daniel jumped back with a curse, but Minjun remained perfectly still, watching Kai with an expression that was impossible to read. "I'm so sorry," Kai mouthed, his face showing appropriate distress. He quickly pulled out his notepad, something he always carried, and wrote, "I will bring new drinks immediately. Please forgive my clumsiness." The manager appeared instantly, apologizing profusely and glaring at Kai with fury in his eyes. But Kai was already moving, gathering the wine-stained cloth, the glasses, everything, including the poisoned wine glass that he wrapped carefully in the cloth. He returned moments later with fresh drinks, and this time he made sure to watch as the wine was poured from a new bottle at the table where everyone could see. Minjun's eyes followed him the entire time. Kai could feel that gaze like a physical touch, burning into him, questioning. Daniel seemed annoyed but not particularly concerned, which told Kai that whatever had been in that vial was meant to act slowly, not immediately. The third man barely paid attention to any of it, absorbed in his phone. Kai retreated to his corner of the restaurant, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. He watched from a distance as the dinner continued. Nothing dramatic happened. No one collapsed. But about an hour later, Daniel excused himself to use the restroom, and Kai noticed he looked slightly pale, slightly off. When Daniel returned, he seemed uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and loosening his tie. It was subtle, but Kai saw it all. Daniel kept drinking water, kept wiping his forehead. Whatever had been in that vial was affecting him now, probably because he'd touched it with his bare hands, or maybe he'd accidentally ingested some when Kai had caused the spill and wine had splashed. Kai felt no satisfaction in Daniel's discomfort, only a grim relief that Minjun was safe. The two men with him looked equally intimidating, but there was something about the one on Minjun's right that made Kai uneasy. He had slicked back blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. While Minjun radiated controlled power, this man felt dangerous in a different way, like a snake waiting to strike. The three men were led to a private section of the restaurant, separated from the main dining area by elegant silk screens. Kai wasn't assigned to their table, but he found his eyes drifting toward them throughout the evening. Something about Minjun fascinated him. Maybe it was the loneliness Kai could see hiding behind those cold eyes. Maybe it was the way Minjun's jaw tightened whenever the blonde man spoke. Or maybe it was simply that Kai recognized something of himself in this powerful stranger, someone wearing a mask to hide their true self from the world. An hour into the dinner, Kai was clearing a nearby table when he noticed movement that made his blood run cold. The blonde man who he'd heard called Daniel was reaching into his jacket. Nothing unusual about that, except Kai saw the way Daniel's eyes darted around first, checking if anyone was watching. Kai turned his head slightly, pretending to focus on stacking plates, but his peripheral vision caught everything. Daniel pulled out a small vial, no bigger than his thumb, and with practiced ease, he uncapped it with one hand while gesturing dramatically with the other to distract Minjun. Time seemed to slow down. Kai watched as Daniel leaned forward, laughing at something, and in that moment he tipped the vial over Minjun's wine glass. The liquid inside was clear, invisible against the red wine. Daniel's hand moved so fast, so smoothly, that even the third man at the table didn't notice. But Kai noticed. Kai always noticed. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. What should he do? He couldn't speak. He couldn't shout a warning. If he tried to write a note, it would be too late. If he pointed or made a scene, would anyone believe him? He was just a mute kid who served food. Daniel was clearly someone important, someone powerful. Who would take Kai's word against his? But Kai thought about his grandmother, about how she taught him that silence wasn't the same as helplessness. He thought about all the people who'd underestimated him because he couldn't speak, who'd assumed he was stupid or weak. And he made a decision. Moving with purpose, Kai picked up a water pitcher and walked directly toward their table. His hands were steady even though his heart was racing. The manager would probably yell at him later for approaching such important guests without being called, but that didn't matter now. Nothing mattered except stopping whatever Daniel had planned. The dinner ended an hour later. The three men stood to leave, and Kai expected them to simply walk out like all the other wealthy customers who never looked back at the people who served them. But Minjun stopped. He turned and looked directly at Kai, who was standing near the kitchen entrance. For a long moment, their eyes met again, and Kai saw something shift in Minjun's expression. Recognition maybe. Or curiosity. Or something else entirely. Minjun walked toward him, each step deliberate and measured. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Even the manager looked nervous, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. Minjun stopped directly in front of Kai, so close that Kai could smell his expensive cologne, something dark and sophisticated like cedarwood and rain. "You spilled my wine on purpose," Minjun said quietly. It wasn't a question. Kai's fingers moved to his notepad, but Minjun raised a hand to stop him. "I saw what happened before you approached our table. I saw Daniel do something to my drink. I saw your face when you noticed, and I saw you make a choice." Kai's eyes widened. So Minjun had been aware the entire time. The CEO's cold mask cracked slightly, showing something almost like warmth beneath. "Why did you help me?" Minjun asked. "You don't know me. I'm nothing to you." Kai pulled out his notepad and wrote carefully, because it was the right thing to do. "Everyone deserves to be safe." Minjun read the words twice, his expression unreadable. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the restaurant. He smiled. It was small and brief, like sunrise breaking through storm clouds, but it transformed his entire face. "What's your name?" he asked. Kai wrote, "Kai Chen." "Kai," Minjun repeated as if testing how the name felt in his mouth. "Thank you, Kai Chen. You saved my life tonight, though you probably don't realize the full extent of it yet." He pulled out a business card and held it out. "If you ever need anything at all, call this number." Kai took the card with trembling fingers. Before he could write a response, Minjun turned and walked away, rejoining his companions who waited by the door. Daniel looked irritated and unwell. The third man looked bored. But Minjun looked back once more before leaving, his eyes finding Kai's across the crowded restaurant, and in that glance, Kai felt something shift in his universe, like a door opening that he hadn't known existed. That night, after his shift ended, Kai sat on the bus heading to the hospital to visit his grandmother. He held Minjun's business card in his hand, running his thumb over the raised lettering. Park Minjun, CEO, Park Technologies. A phone number. An email address. Such simple things, but they felt heavy with possibility. He didn't know then that this was the beginning of everything. He didn't know that saving Minjun's life would change his own forever. He didn't know about the love that would grow between them like flowers in concrete, or the betrayal that would nearly destroy them both, or the revenge that would make him stronger than he'd ever imagined possible. All Kai knew, as the bus rumbled through the night-dark streets, was that when Minjun had looked at him, really looked at him, he hadn't seen a mute boy who served food. He'd seen a person. A hero. Someone who mattered. And for the first time in years, Kai felt like maybe, just maybe, his silence didn't make him invisible after all. 3 months passed like a dream Kai was afraid to wake from. Minjun had started visiting the Golden Lotus 3 times a week, always requesting tables in Kai's section. Always staying long after his meals were finished just to write notes back and forth with the silent boy who'd saved his life. Those notes started simple. Questions about Kai's day, comments about the food, observations about the weather. But gradually, they deepened into something more meaningful. They talked about loneliness, about the masks people wore, about feeling trapped in lives that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty within. Kai learned that Minjun had inherited his company at 23 when his father died suddenly. He learned that Minjun worked 16-hour days because going home to his empty penthouse apartment felt unbearable. He learned that Minjun's mother lived in Korea and called once a month to ask when he'd get married and provide grandchildren, never asking if he was happy or lonely or drowning in expectations he never chose. Most importantly, Kai learned that behind Minjun's cold exterior was someone desperately searching for genuine connection in a world full of people who only wanted something from him. In return, Kai shared his own story through careful handwriting in notebooks that were filling up faster than he could buy new ones. He told Minjun about the car accident when he was 12 that had damaged his vocal cords beyond repair. He wrote about his grandmother, the only family he had left, who was battling diabetes and heart disease while working as a seamstress until her fingers couldn't hold needles anymore. He explained how he dropped out of high school to work full-time, how he dreamed of going to college someday but knew it was impossible, how sometimes he felt like he was disappearing a little more each day under the weight of responsibility and exhaustion. Minjun listened, truly listened, in a way no one else ever had. He didn't offer pity or empty platitudes. Instead, he started teaching Kai about business during their long conversations. He brought books about technology and entrepreneurship. He asked Kai's opinions about company decisions, and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. And one day, Kai arrived at work to find that all of his grandmother's medical bills had been mysteriously paid in full by an anonymous donor. When he confronted Minjun with tears streaming down his face, the CEO simply shrugged and said, "Consider it repayment for saving my life. We're even now." But they both knew they weren't even. They both knew something was growing between them that had nothing to do with debts or gratitude. It was in the way Minjun's eyes softened when Kai smiled. It was in the way Kai's heart raced whenever he saw Minjun walk through the restaurant doors. It was in the comfortable silence they shared, a silence that felt full rather than empty, chosen rather than imposed. The first time Minjun kissed him, they were in Minjun's car in the parking lot behind the restaurant. Kai's shift had ended, and Minjun had offered to drive him to the hospital to visit his grandmother. They'd been sitting there talking. Well, Minjun talking and Kai writing, about a movie they both loved, when suddenly Minjun had gone quiet. He'd reached over and gently taken the pen from Kai's hand, setting it aside along with the notebook. Then he'd cupped Kai's face with both hands, his thumbs tracing Kai's cheekbones, and looked at him with such intensity that Kai felt like he might catch fire. "Can I kiss you?" Minjun had whispered. Kai had nodded, unable to look away from those dark eyes. And when their lips met, Kai understood for the first time why people wrote songs about love. It felt like coming home to a place he'd never been. It felt like finding something he hadn't known he'd lost. It felt like every good thing in the world concentrated into a single perfect moment. After that, they were inseparable. They kept their relationship secret because Minjun's position made publicity dangerous, and because Kai wasn't ready for the world's scrutiny. But in private they built something beautiful. Minjun taught Kai to cook elaborate meals in his kitchen. Kai taught Minjun to appreciate silence and stillness. They watched the sunrise from Minjun's balcony and fell asleep tangled together on his expensive couch. They learned each other's bodies and hearts with equal tenderness. They became each other's safe harbor in a storm-tossed world. 6 months into their relationship, Kai had never been happier. His grandmother was stable and comfortable thanks to the continued anonymous payments for her care. Minjun refused to stop helping despite Kai's protests. Kai had started taking online classes with Minjun's encouragement, working toward his high school equivalency. He was learning sign language to communicate more easily. His future, which had once looked like an endless tunnel of exhaustion and poverty, now glowed with possibility. That was when Daniel decided to destroy everything. Kai had always felt uneasy around Daniel Choi, Minjun's business partner and supposed best friend. There was something predatory in the way Daniel watched Minjun, something possessive that made Kai's skin crawl. But Minjun trusted Daniel completely. They'd known each other since college, had built Park Technologies together, had been through countless business battles side by side. When Kai tried to express his concerns through written notes, Minjun just laughed and said Daniel was harmless, just intense about work. Kai should have pushed harder. He should have made Minjun see what he saw. But he was just a 17-year-old kid who couldn't speak, and Daniel was a wealthy, powerful businessman. Who would believe Kai's instincts over years of friendship? The confrontation happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Kai had just left his morning classes and was heading to the hospital to have lunch with his grandmother when a sleek black car pulled up beside him. The window rolled down and Daniel's cold smile greeted him. "Get in, Kai. We need to talk." Every instinct screamed at Kai to run, but Daniel added, "It's about your grandmother's safety. I think you'll want to hear this." So Kai got in the car, his hands already reaching for his phone to text Minjun. But Daniel was faster. He plucked the phone from Kai's hand with practiced ease and pocketed it. "No interruptions. This won't take long." They drove in silence to a parking garage, empty and echoing. Daniel finally turned to face Kai, and all pretense of friendliness vanished from his expression. "I know about you and Minjun," he said flatly. "I've known for months. I've been watching, waiting to see if this was just a phase, but clearly it's not. So now we're going to have a conversation about your future." Kai grabbed his backup notebook, he always carried two, and wrote furiously, "Minjun loves me. You can't change that." Daniel laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Love? You think this is about love? Minjun is confused, that's all. He's going through a difficult time and you took advantage of his vulnerability. But don't worry, I'll help him see clearly once you're gone." Kai's hands shook as he wrote, "I would never hurt him. I'm not leaving." "Yes," Daniel said softly, dangerously. "You are. Because if you don't, something unfortunate might happen to your grandmother. That nice facility she's in? The one with the excellent care that's keeping her alive and comfortable? I can make one phone call and have her thrown out tonight. The notebook fell from Kai's numb fingers. He stared at Daniel in horror, unable to believe what he was hearing. Daniel leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. I've loved Minjun since college. I've stood by him through everything. His father's death, his mother's emotional abuse, building the company from nothing. I deserve him. I've earned him. And I'm not going to let some mute kid who serves food steal what's mine. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to break up with Minjun. You're going to do it coldly, convincingly. You're going to make him believe you never loved him, that you just wanted his money. And then you're going to disappear. Kai grabbed his notebook with shaking hands. He'll never believe that. He knows me. He'll believe it because he's been hurt before. Because deep down he expects betrayal. Everyone in his life has either wanted something from him or abandoned him. You'll just be confirming what he's always suspected, that he's fundamentally unlovable. It'll break him, yes, but he'll heal. And I'll be there to help him heal. We'll build the life we were always meant to have. You're just an obstacle, Kai. A temporary distraction. Tears were streaming down Kai's face now. He wrote desperately, please don't do this. I love him. He needs me. What he needs is someone from his own world. Someone who can stand beside him at business functions and board meetings. Someone who can speak, who can represent his company, who isn't a charity case. Daniel's words cut like knives because they echoed all of Kai's own insecurities, all the fears he'd tried to bury. You know I'm right. You've always known you don't belong in his world. You're just too selfish to admit it. The worst part was that a small voice in Kai's head agreed. He'd always felt like an imposter in Minjun's life, always wondered when Minjun would wake up and realize he could do so much better. Daniel was just articulating the fears that kept Kai awake at night. You have 24 hours, Daniel said, starting the car. Break up with him cleanly or I destroy your grandmother. And don't think about telling Minjun the truth. I'll deny everything and he'll believe me. Why wouldn't he? I'm his best friend. You're just the boy he's been sleeping with for a few months. Who do you think he'll choose? That night was the longest of Kai's life. He sat with his grandmother, holding her frail hand, watching her sleep peacefully in her clean, comfortable room. She looked so fragile, so dependent on the machines and medications keeping her alive. Could he really risk her life for his own happiness? What kind of person would that make him? But the thought of losing Minjun felt like losing a part of his soul. Minjun was the first person who'd seen past his silence to the person beneath. Minjun made him feel worthy and valued and loved in ways he'd never experienced. Minjun was his future, his hope, his home. Except Minjun wasn't really his, was he? They lived in different worlds. Eventually, Minjun's mother would pressure him into a proper marriage. Eventually, the novelty of dating someone like Kai would wear off. Eventually, Minjun would realize that Daniel was right. Kai was just a phase, a rebellion, a mistake. By morning, Kai had made his decision. His grandmother was real, tangible, present. She'd sacrificed everything to raise him after his parents died. How could he sacrifice her for a relationship that was probably doomed anyway? At least this way he could tell himself he was being noble, selfless, loving. At least this way one of them would survive intact. He sent Minjun a text asking to meet at their favorite spot, a quiet park where they'd had their first real conversation. Minjun arrived with coffee and pastries, his face bright with happiness. I have something to tell you, Minjun started, but Kai shook his head and handed him a letter. He couldn't bear to write it in front of Minjun, couldn't watch those expressive eyes read the lies in real time. Minjun's smile faded as he read. Kai had written exactly what Daniel had told him to write, that the relationship had been a mistake, that Kai had gotten caught up in the luxury and money, that he didn't actually love Minjun, that he wanted to end things before they got more complicated. The words felt like poison on the page, each sentence a betrayal of everything they'd built together. When Minjun finished reading, his face was completely blank. Not angry, not sad, just empty. Is this really how you feel? He asked, his voice carefully controlled. Kai forced himself to nod. He couldn't look at Minjun's eyes, couldn't bear to see the hurt there. Look at me, Minjun said quietly. Please, Kai. Look at me and tell me this is true. That was the moment Kai's heart truly shattered. Because he had to look up, had to meet those dark eyes that had seen him so clearly, had to lie with his whole body. He nodded again, firmly this time, then stood and walked away. He didn't look back. He couldn't. If he'd looked back, he would have run to Minjun and confessed everything, and his grandmother would pay the price. Behind him he heard no sound. Minjun didn't call out or chase after him. There was just silence, the terrible, empty kind that Kai knew too well. The kind that swallowed everything good and left only ashes. That night, Kai cried until he had no tears left. He deleted Minjun's number from his phone, burned all their notes and letters, removed every trace of their relationship from his life except the memories that lived in his heart like shards of glass. He quit his job at the Golden Lotus without explanation. He moved his grandmother to a different facility, one that accepted her on public assistance, just in case Daniel had been lying about continuing her care. And then he disappeared into the kind of life he'd been living before Minjun, working multiple jobs, sleeping too little, existing rather than living. But he made one promise to himself. If he ever found out that Daniel had been lying, if there was ever a way to expose the truth without endangering his grandmother, he would take it. He would burn Daniel's world down with the same ruthlessness Daniel had shown in destroying his happiness. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. For the next 6 months, Kai transformed himself. He channeled all his pain and anger into self-improvement. He finished his high school equivalency with perfect scores. He took every business course he could find online. He studied Daniel's patterns, his business dealings, his weaknesses. He became fluent in sign language and learned to read lips. He built himself into someone who could fight back, someone who couldn't be threatened or dismissed. And then, on a cold morning in March, Kai's grandmother passed away peacefully in her sleep. She'd been deteriorating for weeks, and the end came as a relief rather than a shock. Kai sat beside her bed and held her still warm hand, and felt something inside him shift. The last chain holding him to his old life had broken. He had nothing left to lose. 3 days after the funeral, Kai walked into the Park Technologies building wearing a suit he'd bought from a thrift store and carrying forged credentials that claimed he'd graduated from business school. He'd changed his appearance enough, shorter hair, glasses, different style of clothing, that he was confident Minjun wouldn't recognize him immediately. And he'd changed his name on the application to Kai Park, claiming distant relation to the CEO but no close family ties. He was hired within a week as a junior assistant in the finance department. Not close enough to Minjun to raise suspicion, but close enough to start digging into the company's records. Because during his months of research, Kai had discovered something interesting. Daniel Choi wasn't just stealing Minjun's boyfriend. He was stealing from the company. Millions of dollars funneled into fake vendors and shell corporations. Evidence that would send Daniel to prison if anyone bothered to look closely enough. Kai had bothered to look. And now he was inside the building, inside the system, ready to burn it all down. Not just for revenge, though that was certainly part of it, but also for justice. And maybe, if he was very lucky and very careful, for a chance at redemption. He'd lost Minjun once to save his grandmother. Now his grandmother was gone, and Kai had nothing but time and anger and determination. Daniel had made a mistake in underestimating the mute boy, because Kai's silence had never been weakness. It had always been power waiting for the right moment to speak. That moment had arrived. The Park Technologies building stood 70 stories tall, a monument to ambition and success that pierced the sky like a gleaming sword. Kai walked through its lobby every morning at 7:30, his new identity settled around him like armor. Kai Park, the quiet, efficient junior analyst who never caused problems and always exceeded expectations. No one looked at him twice. No one recognized the boy who'd served them food 8 months ago. That was exactly how he wanted it. His desk was on the 42nd floor, surrounded by other analysts who worked with numbers and spreadsheets and reports that supposedly tracked the company's financial health. Kai's job was to review expense reports, flag inconsistencies, and forward anything suspicious to his supervisor. It was mind-numbingly boring work for most people, but for Kai, it was a treasure map leading directly to Daniel's crimes. Within 2 weeks, he'd identified 37 suspicious transactions. Shell companies with no real addresses. Vendors who existed only on paper. Invoices for services that were never actually rendered. The amounts were small enough to avoid immediate attention. 5,000 here, 10,000 there, but over the past 3 years, they added up to nearly $4 million. Money that should have been funding research and development, employee benefits, community programs. Money that was instead filling Daniel's private accounts. Kai worked slowly and carefully, documenting everything. He created encrypted files on a personal laptop. This response paused because Claude reached its max length for a message. Hit continue to nudge Claude along. Continue.